Well, glad to join you all. Thank you for the invitation, Heidi and Sally. It's good to see you, and welcome, DPF colleagues. I'm joining you from our campus in Rome, and the internet is not super great here, so I hope it goes fine. If there's issues, I'll just mute my video. But greetings from Rome and from the National Science Board. And Heidi and Sally had asked me to give you just kind of a brief update of what's going on with the National Science Foundation and National Science Board right now, and what are our near and long-term priorities in that regard. So I'm happy to do so. I've got a few slides to share with you, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll try not to speak for too long, and if the organizers want to read me the questions, if you curate them and just let me know, and I'll answer to the best of my ability here. So let me try to share my presentation here. Go into slideshow. Can you all see that first slide that
Yes.
says National Science Board updates? Great. Okay. So I thought it would be good for the group if I just gave you a brief synopsis of what the National Science Board is. I know that even though I've been funded by the NSF as a high energy physicist my whole career, pretty much even since I was a student, I had a vaguer notion of what the National Science Board was. I just knew that it was a thing and it existed. It has basically two roles. The National Science Board was created at the same time as the National Science Foundation and the Organic Act of 1950 that created the National Science Board, National Science Foundation, rather, under Vannevar Bush. So first, we're the policymaking body for the foundation side of the organization. So we establish policies. We try to identify issues that are critical to the National Science Foundation's operations and future. And we approve the budget direction, the strategic budget direction. And in the beginning of the foundation's life, the National Science Board actually approved every single award, reviewed and approved every single award. We no longer do that, thankfully, but we do actually review and approve. Well, we approve the reviewed major programs and awards like the MREFC that funds the Large Hadron Collider upgrade, for example, and the original construction and operations of the LHC experiments. So that's one thing that we do. There's 24 of us. We're presidential appointees, and there's a 25th member who's whoever the director of the National Science Foundation is. And we vote on these things in regular meetings throughout the year and we have a mandatory reporting to Congress. The other thing that we do is we're advisors to the President of the United States and the US Congress, and we have a congressionally mandated report called the Science and Engineering Indicators, or indicators for shorthand, that we issue. And we also issue policy reports on science and engineering and STEM education and the US workforce. This is one of our recent reports called Vision 2030, which was focused on kind of a looming deficit of STEM talent in the United States over the past few years, and it's what that portends for the future of the United States. Everything that we do is publicly available in these documents, as well as the public meetings minutes and recordings are also all public. So if you haven't read that, it's been a couple of years since we've issued it, but it's still relevant in many parts. So I would encourage you all to read through that. And I'd like to focus on a few national key questions. First is, how can America keep its lead in fundamental research, which we've had now for a long time, and it's led to the prosperity that we have in the United States. I think there's no question from anyone that that's true. And how can American discoveries continue to empower us as a country, and in particular businesses and entrepreneurs who take these discoveries and innovate and and create products and new technologies from them. But to do this, we need to increase the STEM skilled workforce and opportunities for all Americans. And this little cartoon on the right kind of shows you the virtuous cycle of how this has operated in the United States for the past several decades. And here are some more recent reports. The one on the right is the most current, which is a deep dive into the state of U.S. science and engineering workforce, and it shows where we have some real deficits, but also some promising signs for the future. And I'll zero in on some of that here in the next couple of slides. The one on the left is focusing on the skilled technical workforce, which is not people like most of us on this call, not PhD active researchers, but people who are trained to go and work for the technical training in science and engineering that's needed by companies and by the government in order to execute on these discoveries. So the future roadmap for us that we've identified as the National Science Board is to foster this kind of global science and engineering community and to expand the geography of innovation in the United States from where it's been clustered historically in a small number of places to a more broader geographic range in the United States, and to help America deliver on the benefits from this research, that the fundamental research like we do, how do we deliver that to the United States? And how can the National Science Foundation develop a STEM talent pipeline for the United States? So here are four of those priority areas to address those needs: delivering on benefits from research, expanding the geography of innovation, fostering the global science and engineering community. But I want to focus on developing the STEM talent for the United States. So we must make education a federal, state, and local priority, and we need to hold ourselves accountable with reliable and up-to-date data. And we have within the House of the National Science Foundation the NCSES, which is an internal clearinghouse of science and engineering statistics to help us answer these questions and to give the kind of analyzed data to Congress and to the president. Recently, the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 was enacted really to counter a growing tech sector in the People's Republic of China, and to restore the United States to global competitiveness, which it's being eroded. And to do this instrument established university technology centers for industries of tomorrow. It increased funding for community colleges, which is a point that I'll come back to in a sec. And it authorized increasing funding for the newly erected TIP Directorate in the National Science Foundation, and targeted emerging research institutions like R2s, Research 2 universities, to increase the research capacity. So not just focusing so much on the research powerhouses like the large state universities and Ivies, but to try to focus on areas of talent that don't have the opportunities. Moving on, if you haven't read it, this is a letter from this year from President Trump to Michael Kratsios, who's the director of OSTP, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is within the White House, the convening body for the different science agencies like the Department of Energy, Office of Science, National Science Foundation, NIH, etc. And in it, and I think it's a good letter. And if you read it, I think you will see some promising signs there in terms of priorities for the administration, identifying key national needs for national prosperity and security. In particular, there's five of them that are called out. We must continue to lead in AI, which we are currently, quantum, which we also are currently, synthetic biology and biotech, nuclear energy, and space. And to do this, we need to have a deeper collaboration with industry, which has a much greater speed and scale than universities or individual researchers do. Just recently, my friend Dario Gil, who's the newly appointed and confirmed Undersecretary for Science in the Department of Energy, Dario Gil. Dario was on the National Science Board with me for for the past few years, so I got to know and work with Dario. And Dario was the elected chair of the National Science Board. But when he was appointed to be the Undersecretary for Science, he stepped off the board, and Victor McCrary, who was the current vice chair at the time, became the chair of the National Science Board. Was elected. He was acting, and then became elected chair of the National Science Board, and I became elected as the new vice chair of the National Science Board. And Dario's Genesis mission is really quite innovative and exciting, and he recently gave a hearing before Congress to talk about it. And it's going to it's going to create an integrated platform that connects this AI infrastructure, computing infrastructure with experimental facilities and AI systems and the unique data sets across all of the major scientific domains, really to really ramp up the productivity and impact of the kind of research and innovation that we do within a decade. So it's really a kind of it's not a brand new approach, but it's really a focused and intentional approach to this type of integration of large scientific facilities and compute. In FY25, the research thrusts for areas of investment from the NSF and from the science agencies. On the left, you see the administration's priorities, and on the right, you see our current areas of research and areas of strength and capabilities for economic development for the United States. We've got, we really are leading in AI for the moment and in fintech for national and domestic security. Again, AI, cybersecurity, PSYOPs, digital healthcare, systems engineering, such as acoustics, and then finally, non-traditional pathways to the middle class. Um, a better look, a hard look, and you know, setting some concrete targets on how community colleges and non-traditional pathways can play a role. And again, you see AI coming up again, quantum, data science, and cyber literacy. So those are the areas of investment and support that we're getting from the current administration. And when talking to industry partners, which is something I do a lot in my current job as the provost of a university in Washington, D.C., which has a large high-tech sector. We've got the largest, I think, the largest number of data centers of these large data centers in the United States in Northern Virginia, and then the DMV area, the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. These people face major workforce shortages, and especially in critical technologies for both the Department of Energy and the Department of War. And with the disruption in the workforce from AI, there's a large numbers of really talented staff that work for these corporations, which need upskilling. They need to be retrained with the current tools on how to use them in their jobs. And there's a huge lack. And so the private sector they can't hire enough new people to fill these roles, and they can't educate or upskill their existing workforce. And this is a threat to our national prosperity. For example, in cybersecurity, there's over 500,000 job openings currently out there that aren't being filled, and approximately 3 million additional workers that are fluent in AI tools are going to be needed in the next year. And in the semiconductor industries, nearly 300,000 skilled technical workers are needed. In manufacturing, 700,000 job openings are currently available. And in computing, less than half of the jobs are going to be filled that are needed by next year. So these are major lacuna that we have here in our STEM talent workforce in the United States. Starting at taking a look at our younger children, the future of our workforce, we rank 25th out of 37 economically developed countries, and we've had stagnant performance compared to our peers here for uh, well over a decade. And this gap, even within the United States, in areas, this gap has worsened because of the pandemic, but there was already an endemic problem. On the more positive side, and this is why I mentioned community colleges and also Research One universities like ours can play a role in this. This is a graph of the number of associate degrees. So these are 2-year degrees in the science and engineering fields, which are listed here: computer science, social science, biology, psychology, physical sciences, math, engineering, etc. For the past almost 20 years. And you can see that the numbers have grown in every one of these different fields. The numbers of people getting these types of associate's degrees, which qualifies them for many of the jobs that are needed in the science and engineering sector, is growing. So we are growing a STEM educated workforce in these 2-year degrees, and this is actually one of the reasons why my university is starting to produce these types of programs available uh, to students in the DMV in our regional area, which is where most of our local students come from, or most of our enrolled students come from for in-person classes. But also we're spinning up online education for associate's degrees in exactly these same fields. And if you look at historically historical sectors of the population demographically that have not been represented in these types of STEM fields, you'll see that the growth is higher there. So wrapping it up here in just a couple of minutes, here's some highlights of what we think are our accomplishments in the last year for the National Science Board. We forged several multi-sectoral partnerships for the National Science Foundation with government-wide and government and university industry philanthropy roundtable research. We call it GIPR. Cultivated state and private sector entities to explore future support of our graduate research fellowships. So we are issuing more of those degrees. That's our more of those fellowships. That's the plan. And that would give research universities like ours some relief, because this is something that graduate students apply for themselves, and it goes to the student, and the student takes it with them to the university of their choice. And they've been highly prestigious in the past, and they still are super competitive, but there's the demand far exceeds the supply of these. So it's kind of a very cost-effective, high ROI investment in that higher level, upper level upper echelons of the educated STEM workforce. Partnering with our statistics center on enhancing the congressionally mandated indicators so that there's better accessibility and more relevant data for you and for legislators. We issued a statement in May that I think was very good. We've issued some policy briefs on this type of competitive race for the future of the United States and how the NSF investments are key to our U.S. leadership, and especially in quantum and AI. And we've been very active, and I'm fortunate that both myself and the chair of the National Science Board are both locals here in DC. So it's relatively easy for us to engage on the Hill and in the White House and in the private sector, being just a few metro stops away from Capitol Hill. And we've had over 75 such engagements, and I'm pretty morally certain that they've moved the needle on a few things here, which I'll talk about next. The president's proposed budget for the National Science Foundation, which I'll focus on for the just for the rest of this talk, and that's what I'm mostly competent to answer questions about, um, was dramatically smaller than previous years' budgets for the National Science Foundation, about $3.8 billion dollars compared to about $9 billion dollars, or 10 billion was the aspiration. But when engaging the Hill, we found, they had lots of questions, both on both sides of the aisle, and things that they certainly wanted us to change. But general support, I generally get put in front of the Republicans because of my voting record, but I engage Democrats as well, and I personally have found very, very strong support for science funding, and particularly the NSF, from both sides of the House and the Senate. And I think that's reflected here in these the Senate and House marks of 7 billion from the House and 9 billion from the Senate. It's we still don't have a budget yet, so these are just marks. It needs to go through the full process before we have a law that funds the National Science Foundation for the next fiscal year. But these are concrete good signs from Congress, who writes the law and controls the budget. You may have heard that the actual headquarters of the National Science Foundation, which are located in Alexandria, Virginia, are moving, and the current building that they occupied for the past several years, which was built to spec for the NSF, is going to be occupied by Housing and Urban Development HUD, and that the NSF is going to be moving around the corner. It's literally just around the block in Alexandria, in unused offices in the U.S. PTO's office, and this is underway now. So this is happening immediately. And it's, as far as I can tell, it's going well. The staff on the leadership of the National Science Foundation have done a very, very good job of rapidly responding to this move. And so I don't have too many worries about this relocation happening. Of course, whenever you move house, there's always disruption and things that you discover when you move into your new house that you didn't know about. But these guys are extremely competent, and I personally don't have any worries. I'm not losing any sleep over this NSF relocation. NSF is also reorganized, which is, I think personally, I think we've needed to do that for some time now. And I'd say that it's probably true that the president's proposed budget kind of accelerated that reorganization. And what's happened is so far all the directorates that we've had before are essentially still in place, but that there's been an administrative reduction in the number of management levels to help this type of consolidation and efficiency. And if you look at the outputs of the NSF, we're getting money out the door. We put out $8.3 billion last fiscal year and awarded over 8,300 awards. So it's still clicking along. So here's some talking points as for a path forward for the APS. You all are members of a national security asset. Um, this research and workforce development is so important, and the universities that you all work for are a key part of that. I'd ask that you help advocate for increased FY26 NSF funding, especially for HBCUs, to meet the administration's aspirations to support HBCUs, which you'll see in the executive orders. So I think those are positive signs that you can help us with too. And then finally, we all want the same thing, I think, here. But really, we have one particular rival, but not the only one, that really do seek to usurp our position as the world's greatest maker of marvels and producers of knowledge that have really led to the prosperity of the United States and really the whole world. And I think we play an important role in the world, not just for America, but we actually serve an important role in the world as the United States. And so we need to recapture that, not just for us, but really for mankind. So this really, I think, brings us back to our roots at the National Science Foundation, and it's time for us to really focus on the core mission of the National Science Foundation. And you all, as the American Physical Society, you advance physics by fostering a vibrant, inclusive, and global community dedicated to science and society. That slots right in with this whole mission. And then finally, this is a slide that my friend Vic McCrary, the chair of the Science Board, frequently puts up at the end of our meetings. That if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we are at the table, and that's what I'm doing, serving you. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Here's my contact information, provost@cua.edu works. And if you're ever in DC, please give me a call and let me know when you're going to be in town. And I'd be happy to talk to you about anything. And with that, I'll go ahead and close my stop sharing and take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aaron. You've got quite a few questions actually in the live document, so I'll read them to you one at a time.
Okay.
From Corrado Gatto, this is a long one. Is the National Science Board aware of the growing competition from China in high energy physics? It seems they've taken the theorist's message seriously, shifting focus to the search for new physics at lower energies. They're already moving forward with major initiatives like a super tau charm factory, a super eta prime, etc. factory, and even a Higgs factory. Meanwhile, none of these kinds of projects has been approved in the US. Are these developments being considered in current strategic planning?
Yeah, I am aware of much of that, and in fact, the board received an unclassified briefing, although it's controlled unclassified information that I can't fully share. But China is going gangbusters at building new facilities, not just new high energy physics facilities, but world-class, state-of-the-art, uh, high-tech facilities all across mainland China. So there's no question that we're being outpaced in terms of the type of infrastructure development. And I think what they've done is they just read our playbook for the past 50, 70 years. Like that's what we did. That's what the National Science Foundation and what we did as a country after World War II. So we need to take our core strengths and really, I think, mash our foot on the gas pedal here to develop our infrastructure and talented people in the United States. But yes, I'm definitely aware of that.
Here's a question from Via. What are the plans of NSF to accept new initiatives at the South Pole, approximately 2035? Will the infrastructure improvements be completed by then? Is there a profile of investment and schedule for those improvements?
Yeah, that's so. And for those of you who don't know, the NSF um, runs the logistics and funds the basic science for pretty much for all the science that happens in Antarctica, and quite a bit as well in the North Pole. And so the Office of Polar Programs, which includes both the North and South Poles activities, um, have been elevated in status within the within the organizational structure of the NSF. This is part of the reorg, really to focus more, to really give top level focus on our polar programs, in particular Antarctica. And COVID really did a number on us because you can't really last too long without improving infrastructure in Antarctica. And with that fallow years, we definitely suffered. I was there 2 years ago to visit it, and it definitely needs infrastructure upgrades. And I think we also need to partner with the national security agencies, um, and leverage the logistics that the military has with the science that we can do. We need some more C-130s in order to make deliveries of equipment and people. Um, and so, yes, absolutely. For me, Antarctica is definitely something that we need to be paying attention to. And when I was the chair of the Awards and Facilities Committee, Antarctica is one of those large facilities that the National Science Board does have under its direct purview. Um, we began some of this restructuring. We're rebidding the logistical contractor for Antarctica, so that's the first step, and that's underway now.
You have a question from David Miller. The letter to OSTP is indeed promising. Thank you for sharing it. Can you please elaborate on the comment that fundamental science needs to move at the pace of industry? There are both good and bad reasons that academia does not typically move at that pace, and I'm curious about how much consideration this imperative gives to the nuances of what this might mean.
Yeah, David, that's a good question, and I think it's true. And when I meet guys who are CTOs like at Microsoft, um, they're and I just brought one of them into my team at Catholic, Taylor Black, who's in the CTO's office at Microsoft, and he was kind of taken aback at the pace of progress or change or rapidity that academia has compared to industry. And we really operate with a different clock cycle on our CPUs. We're more thorough and forward thinking, and they're much quicker. Um, and so there is a bit of an impedance mismatch here, and I think we can help each other. Um, and the NSF, we have these large facilities, but we've also been funding for the past 50 years individual researchers. So that's how I cut my teeth. Probably most of us that way. But there's only so much that an individual researcher can do, and there are things that a larger group, a larger team, a larger interdisciplinary team can do and move faster. So I think we should rethink, how could we, as academics, rethink the way that we conceive of our research.
Here's a question from Sekar Chavukula. As you mentioned, NSF underwent very significant changes, including personnel reductions and the loss of their primary building at the beginning of this administration. What is the future of NSF, and how does the administration, as opposed to Congress, see NSF's value in the future? The president's budget proposed very significant cuts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the NSF's future is good. I mean, the NSF is in no danger of being deleted. I think there was um, some anxieties around that. I can just tell you that I have not seen or heard any of that. So if you're worried about the NSF essentially being closed down, that's not happening. Um, so at least if there's that existential worry, you, I haven't seen it. And in particular, the NSF directorate doesn't see it, and they're the ones who really live this stuff. The National Science Board, I'm essentially an unpaid advisor. The National Science Foundation's directorate, that's their full-time job. So if there were anybody to worry about it, be those guys, and they're not. But I think what you see in that president's budget um, is a question of the what is the future of the NSF? How can it be relevant to these national priorities? And it definitely can. And so we need to respond to that affirmatively. So I think it's up to us to do that. And so I think that letter lays out some of the roadmap for this foundation writ large. And so that's where we're headed is how can we really play a visible role how can we redouble down on the National Science Foundation's core mission, which is to it's really to secure the national prosperity and security of the United States through science.
Here's a question from Ramona Vogt. How does the mandate in the president's letter agree with the loss of funding at universities and the Department of Education? We need a good educational background for people to move into STEM and contribute to this workforce. It all sounds great, but how does the government help continue to fund students to educate them to meet this demand?
Yeah. From, over the several years I've been on the science board, I think because we're educators, we at least in where I've worked, our the primary education that we deliver is to undergraduate and graduate students, but they don't just show up, tabula rasa. They go through primary school and secondary school, mostly in the United States, but also from abroad. And there's a there's something of a temptation for us to try to veer into K through 12 education as the science foundation. We need to think about how can we build a sort of an infrastructure that supports K through 12 education. We're not in charge of policies for K through 12 education. I mentioned one way we can do it for graduate students, the GRFPs. So that's definitely a concrete way we can do it for post-secondary education. Um, but that's really that's something that we really need to pay attention to, and where we can, as universities, I think, play this intermediary role is giving high quality, 2-year degrees in science and engineering that rapidly allow people to get really good jobs. Um, and that workforce is needed. It doesn't mean we have to become community colleges. It means that we have to, I think, rethink a sector of our education as universities and work with community colleges. So I'll give you an example. We established a campus in Tucson, Arizona, of Catholic University, which is based here in DC and in Rome, and partnered with Pima Community College to put together essentially a 2+2 degree program there in Tucson locally with an async and then in person on Friday 4-year degree program in partnership with Pima Community College. And we're doing it as affordably as possible. Students who are fully Pell eligible and are eligible for Arizona state level equivalent uh, essentially pay something on the order of $1,200 a year for their 4-year degree. That's something we can do.
Here's a question from Jordan Stark. There was a comment on the slide about AI needing 3 million workers. Can you comment or clarify what this refers to? Data centers are not heavily staffed, so does this refer to development of AI ML or the use of it in science or something else? If the industry is in need of this talent, why the increase in workforce reductions across tech industries?
I'll have to get back to you. I don't know I don't have in my head origin of all the assumptions that went into that $3 million or 3 million workforce shortage. But you're absolutely right. Data centers, once they're built, don't require many people to run it. I just visited one in Seattle, Washington, a month ago with my friend Taylor Black, who I mentioned, my colleague David Black, Taylor Black rather. And yeah, they are very large facilities, but they don't need a whole lot of workers to do it. I think what it's pointing to is this disruption that's happened because of the rapid. and somewhat unforeseen, I think, impacts that AI has had on the workforce.
It's a question from Maurice Garcia Severis.
Hey, Maurice.
You gave statistics on the lack of talent industry faces in the US. How does that compare to the situation worldwide? Is Europe facing a similar shortage? Is China facing a similar shortage?
Maurice, that's a good question. I don't really know the answer. I do know that China is doubling down on it and is luring away people. And we probably have friends who've been taken, who have accepted positions for, their own family reasons and because they're interested in the work, who've been, hired into universities and corporations in mainland China. So they're aggressively going after this. They have demographic problems. That's sort of it's a few, maybe a different order of magnitude, at least in the future than we do. But they're aggressively pursuing this. Europe, I'm less able to answer what type of workforce shortages that they have, but it must be more acute because if you look at the most of the um, rapid developments in AI and quantum, it's happening in the United States and not in Europe. So I think they have a double whammy there.
Here's a remark from Chanda Prescott Weinstein. While AI/ML approaches present some interesting opportunities, it's still critically important that we continue to have a broad range of approaches to research in high energy physics. With the cuts to funding that primarily supports the development of early career scientists, I'm wondering how to square the desire to remain competitive with the reality that all of our resources to do so outside of a research focus on AI/ML are disappearing.
I don't quite understand the question, but there's new tools, and we should be thinking how we can deploy these in high energy physics, and I know we are. And I encourage you to think of, think of ways to work with guys who are and gals who are experts in this, in that type of machine learning space. I mean, particle physicists have been doing this for a while. I remember I wrote artificial neural network in Fortran for crying out loud in the 1990s. Um, but things have developed much quicker than I think people expected. So how do you put together a joint proposal with your friends, in the other building there, who from engineering, for your next, large interdisciplinary high energy physics award, and to be thinking that way. There's still, I think, a very important role for individual researchers and individual PI grants. You mentioned early career grants. I got one of those. It changed my life. I'm an NSF career awardee in my first or second year. So it certainly has a huge impact. And so there's definitely a role for individual PI grants, but I think I'm encouraging you to be thinking about uh, larger teams and to take these tools and learn about them. Um, Go to AI boot camp or something and learn how can you use this to help design, new crystals for calorimetry or things like that. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do.
We have a question from Mike Albro. Will the NSF continue or increase support for public outreach using science with art and science with music?
Hi, Mike. Um, I don't know the answer to your question. I haven't heard that talked about in a while, Mike. I think that's probably a low cost line item in the NSF's budget at any given time. Um, but for sure, if you have to respond to a 50% budget cut, you have to rank order uh, things sort of in Maslow's hierarchy of things, and so there's some things that you would press pause on, and I can't speak competently, about that. That's just sort of my thoughts on it, Mike. But if you want, I can ask the guys about it.
We have just a couple more questions. This is from Evelyn Thompson. encouraged by the comment on support for increase in the number of graduate NSF fellowships. 2025 number was half of previous years. Will the number of awards be back to the 2024 level or higher than 2024 in the coming year?
I I can't I don't know. This is those numbers are set by NSF leadership and not by the board, and I have not seen um, the budget for that. But I certainly there's been broad agreement between the foundation and the board side that um, this is a priority, and OSTP and OMB also have supported that. So I think there's a good chance that that definitely is pretty high ROI and relatively inexpensive investment that meets these national needs that come out of both the mission of the National Science Foundation and the current administration's stated um, priorities that you see in that letter to Mike.
Here's a lengthy or multi-part question from J.U. It is encouraging to see the uptick trend of the awarded associate degrees recently. What do you think are the causes of the uptick, and what are the things we need to do to strategically and fundamentally further strengthen and maintain this uptick trend long term? And also, the goal of the Genesis mission is to double the R&D productivity in 10 years. While this seems reasonable, it seems a bit modest as a goal of a long-term multi-billion-dollar mission. Do you have any idea where this goal is based on to under-promise and over-deliver?
Well, on that last one, I don't have enough intel on this to judge the full phase space here of what you're talking about. It is something new. Dario is an exceptionally skilled guy. He's got a lot of really good ideas. He's been partnering with the other science agencies, all the DOE national labs are fully behind this. So yeah, I would love to over deliver, but it doesn't look to me prima facie to be an under promise. Um, but I'm not Dario. I'd have to spend some time with him to get to understand what his numbers are. Sorry, Heidi, or Sally, what was the first part of the question again?
Um, the, it is encouraging to see the uptick trend.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, it's a good question. We've asked that to NCSES, and it would require a survey, really, I think, of these students. My instincts, and the students that I know, tell me that it's primarily people who realize that the STEM workforce is is a place that you can get a great job that supports you and your family's future and help you build generational wealth that you may not have had coming into it, which would have priced you out of some type of higher education from a certain class of universities that would be inaccessible to you. And so they see it as a real future for their families and something that's generally much more affordable than a four-year degree at many of the kind of universities otherwise. And it's people who are, who want to live and work in the United States and help build it. Um, and I know some of these students, and I know the kind of background that they come from. So that's what I think it is. And I think it's something we should pay more attention to.
Thank you again, Aaron. I think we have to cut this a little short, although there might be a few more questions. I would encourage those folks to contact Aaron directly, maybe by email,
Yeah.
through his staff. And we have to move on to the next talk now, which is
Okay.
Marcel DeMarteau. So
Okay.
thanks.
Well, it was great seeing you all virtually. I would buy you a virtual beer in the virtual bar tonight. But until then, I'll see you. Hope to see you soon. Take care.